There is a big AI skill gap in the UK, and the UK government recognises this, and the UK industry recognises this, and is doing quite a lot to train the next generation of our engineers to solve this problem. But this problem still exists now, and it's not our young, fresh graduates which are driving forward our industry for sort of the next 20 or 30 years that it will take these skills to percolate through with these graduates. And so this is a problem, right? We need to solve our skills problem now. And what I'm talking about today is what Techworks and what we are doing to solve that. So specifically, I've already had my introduction from Nick. I'm William Jones. I'm the head of AI at Emicosm, and I'm leading the Best Practices Guide at Techworks. And this is a small group of us have been creating this guide over the last few years. And the goal of this guide is to help reskill and retrain existing engineers to upskill them and take them from being good software engineers or good electronic systems engineers to being good AI engineers. So our motivation for doing that is, let's have some more readable text there. Our motivation for doing it is essentially, as I've discussed already, right? We have a giant skill gap in AI in the UK. A couple of examples here. Over the last few years, the UK government's thrown about 120 million at a skills package for mostly our fresh graduates and our postgraduates. The government itself just identifies that it doesn't have enough AI skills to do things, and particularly it can't retain its staff when they do develop the skills. They go and leave and go to industry where they can get more money. And firms who are trying to develop AI just face this massive technical skill gap. This is the 62% of firms who are trying to do AI. They just can't do it because they don't have enough people who have this capability. And as I've said, the problem is that we are addressing the problem with things like this $120 million skills package for our postgraduates, but we need things to be solved now, and particularly it is our skilled, experienced engineers with 20, 30 years experience who drive things forward. And this is, I think there's sort of a gap in the market that we are trying to address here. The UK is very, very rich in its tech stock and in our software engineering capabilities. And the fact of the matter is that if you are a good software engineer, if you're a good electronic systems engineer, you're sort of 80% of the way along to being a good AI engineer as well. You have almost all of the skills you need, and the last 20% is not trivial. In fact, it's quite difficult, and it needs teaching. But it's a lot easier to teach somebody who is 80% of the way along than it is to teach somebody 0% of the way along. So I was here last year, and this is very similar to the stuff that I spoke about last year. But since last year, we've also had a sort of fresh set of things from the UK government about our tech strategy for AI in the UK. And most recently, we had the AI Opportunities Action Plan that the government commissioned last year, and in fact, we've had the government's response to that early this year. And this lays out 50 things that the UK government needs to do to take a lead in AI and to retain that lead going into the future. And obviously 50 is quite a lot of things, but there's sort of two things that really stick out in the context of what we're trying to do with Techworks AI, and particularly what we're trying to do with the Best Practice Guide. One of the recommendations, which is obviously sort of very important, is the recognition in this action plan that we do need to expand our education pathways into AI, but very specifically that we need to expand them at all levels, and it needs to be done as a collaboration with industry to make sure that we are all getting the good skills that we have to teach each other, rather than just focusing on fresh graduates, which has been something that's been going on. The other thing is that another recommendation of this guide that the government seems to totally approve of is this idea of publishing best practice guidance, and particularly of centralizing the best practice guidance that we have available. Government wants us to go away, wants DCIT specifically to go away and create an AI knowledge hub where things like the best practice guidance that we're working on, case studies, open source solutions can be centrally found. And so essentially what I want to do here and what I want to set out here is that it's sort of what we're doing is not just addressing the sort of small problem of upskilling our own industry, but that what we're trying to do with Techworks AI and what we're trying to do with the best practices is sort of is strategically aligned with where things are going with the UK tech sector at the moment. In terms of what we are specifically doing with this best practice guide, what I spoke about was so far is that this is a guide for helping reskill existing engineers. Because again, it's much easier to retrain somebody who is 80% of the way there than it is to retrain 20% somebody who is 20% of the way there, and we do have such a rich tech stock in the UK. And this guide is, what we're developing is a guide to take somebody from top to bottom who has a decent level of software engineering skills and help them have a reference manual and guide for achieving their very first AI project. We've been quite inspired by the success of the IOTSF and the IOTSF guidelines that have come out and have been very, very successful in how we've approached this. But at the top level, our best practices guide focuses on just 5 really high-level questions about how people should approach doing their projects. The first one of these is asking the very important question of course, should we actually be doing AI? Because while it's a very useful tool for many people, we don't need to be doing it in every case. And certainly in many cases, there are better things to be doing than AI and machine learning. We need to ask ourselves how we're going to approach this, and particularly to set out a plan of sort of how we're going to use AI to solve our problem. And this is important because in some ways this is good software engineering practice. This type of planning is good software engineering practice for which the type of people we're teaching, experienced software engineers, should already be doing. But there's unique caveats and unique difficulties that come across when you're doing things in a very data-driven way. You don't want to get tripped up because you have not considered data poisoning, like Nick was discussing before, or that tripped up because you're collecting the wrong kind of data that you shouldn't really be collecting. You need to think about these things before you do things. On the topic of data, we then want people to focus on where they're getting their data before they do anything, because if you don't have good data, then whatever you're doing with your AI and machine learning is not going to work. And if you do have good data, then you're likely to be very successful. We focus on how you're going to train your AI model, because that is obviously a key part of what we're doing. And we ask people to think about how they're going to deploy their AI model, because if we don't deploy it, it's not very useful. And from these 5 top-level questions that we've centered this guide around, we create a set of tasks and a pathway for our software engineers to work through to go from the start of their project, where they are competent software engineers but don't know anything about AI, to the end of their project, where they finished their first AI project and have, if following our guide, hopefully done so in a competent and effective way, following best practices, and having made none of the common mistakes, which, if you are not aware of, that you are likely to fall afoul of. So this guide is something we've been developing for the last few years as a small team, and this isn't like a sort of hypothetical product that we are looking to develop in the future. It's something that's actually existing now. Now, it's not completely finished. There's been, as I said, only a small team of us working on this, but there's a fairly good version of the guide up at the moment already. It's really openly available, and I'll put a link up to it and a QR code in a second. And very broadly, this is what it looks like. And if you are interested in contributing, this is something that we host in restructured text. So if you do want to create and add to our beautiful website, all you really have to do is code things up in Markdown. And in terms of where we're at with publishing the guide, as I just said, it's something we've been developing for a few years, and we have an early version of the guide already. And in fact, we're looking to do an event to discuss best practices and to launch the first version of this guide next month. So next month, we have 3 speakers. We have me speaking about this best practice guide in a little bit more detail about where we're going with it, what we're hoping to achieve in future. We have Charles McFarlane, formerly from CodePlay, who will be, I think, giving us a little bit more of a perspective from industry about best practices. We have Yazan Kawat, who from the Manufacturing Technology Centre, who will be speaking about a little bit of the work they're doing, I think from a little bit more of an academic perspective. And this will be all about best practices and all about, from particularly from my point of view, the best practices we're doing here. So to finish off, by the way, I've generated this nice image with stable diffusion. It's nice to finish with an AI-generated image. It's nice. But one of the reasons I'm speaking to you, similar to Nick, is because we need contributors to this project. So, as I said, we've got something good. We've been developing with a small group, but it would be an awful lot better if we had more people looking at this and more people, particularly, I think, just a larger diversity of opinions and points of view on what constitutes a good guide, I think would help a lot. We'd be most interested in having technical contributors. Again, it's a small group of us. It would really help to have some people who have strengths where we're not quite as strong give us their thoughts on things. And if you want to access the guide, there's a QR code you can scan here, or there's a link to our GitHub source right there. Anyway, thank you for listening to the talk. I was hoping at the start that I could convince all of you that this problem that I was posing with a skill gap in the UK, and particularly a skill gap of our most experienced engineers, is a tractable problem, particularly with our best practice guide. And I hope I've done that. But it's not just on Techworks to solve this problem of how we train the next generation and the current generation of AI engineers. It's all of our problems. And this is something that we do commercially as well. We do one-day courses for senior executives. We do week-long courses, intensive week-long courses for engineers, and we do mentorship and training for engineering teams undertaking their first AI project. Anyway, thank you very much. That is the end.